Violence on fire, but we have time to debate ethics. Eat the rich. That is my answer to this, genuinely. We should just eat the rich because it is an actual solution. No, when it comes to the actual, when we need to discuss what has come up in this debate, what has largely come down to is discussions of efficacy and ethics. It has come down to whether or not we consider eco-terrorism to actually be an ethical solution to the problem and whether it be an effective solution to the problem. And to this, the opposition has raised a couple of points, such as the civil resistance model, how violent movements bring about discredit peaceful movements, and then also about how, and then also on the point of the ethics, it's like how can you, how it breeds more, and how can you value life and sort of peace, and when instead you promote an act for violence. And basically, we actually argue that on the proposition, we've introduced a series of points that we've not been able to successfully take down up and throughout with these points. First of all, with regards to just to address the ethics of it, everyone here is conclusively agreed that we are completely screwed if we don't take radical action right now. That I don't think is up for debate in any shape or form. In fact, my main question is in what world how you can actually value things like contemporary property and things like that over, in fact, the potential to completely and utterly devastate our planet. How can you actually value things like business investments and oil pipelines over people's homes, over the vast amount of displacement by population that is going to occur if climate change happens to the full extent? That is something which I do not personally believe is a full weight of the ethics of the matter, and because of that, and also as a further on point, there was an expectation that if we sort of just waited long enough, that if we did not take radical action, that eventually innovation will push forward and we'll achieve what we want. That is not actually, first of all, wait and see attitude has been kind of the de facto modus operandi of the environmental movement for the last 40, 50 years. And so far we haven't really seen the radical change that we want. And then secondly, the innovations that have largely pushed to the fore, things like solar and wind power, are fundamentally tied to incredibly environmentally damaging acts in their own right. Things like strip mining, when you are fundamentally tied to profits, to things to controlling resources and limiting resources away from other people, you inherently create a system where it's actually easier to exploit the environment for your own benefit. But now we're going to talk about the efficacy of the movement. And our first speaker brought up a civil resistance model, how it is incredibly effective. However, I don't know if you noticed, but he had 6 steps. That is a lot of steps for things to go wrong. And that is actually where and even then, even on top of those 6 steps that are entirely necessary for the movement to achieve, steps which I don't even think we are necessarily going to be able to guarantee are going to happen globally to the scale that we can guarantee the systemic shift that is necessary, it also is predicated on one false premise, that the government we are facing doesn't care. Like, it cares about people being arrested. We have countless cases of where people have tried to peacefully protest environmental change and instead environmental exploitation, and instead been met with brutal and horrific violence, as the proposition's already outlined. There has not been provided a strong case as to why suddenly countries or corporations that have for years been treating indigenous populations in the Americas with absolute horrifically, are going to suddenly switch now that we start minorly disrupting them. Is it because white people are disrupting them? No, they're going to continue doing what they do, but it's just going to be out of sight of us. Pretty much like an example that was already raised was the Dakota Access Pipeline. The Dakota Access Pipeline was all over news and social media for about a couple months, if I remember correctly, and it still went through. The government still sided with the corporations. The government decided to did not stop violence against the indigenous peoples, and fundamentally what happened was it completely fell flat on its face. Now there was another point raised about like violent social movements and don't work. We already had John highlighted a couple social movements that have been violent but have worked. I'm not going to go into further cases, but basically any post-colonial state is going to be like, excuse me, I think our social movement worked. There's also the issue of like how radicalism, how violent movements, things are more radical. Well, as has been repeatedly pointed out in this debate, we do not have time to be moderate. We are on the edge of a global catastrophe. We don't have time to sit down and think, is this ethical? No, because we are currently staring down the barrel of a shotgun, and we have to choose whether or not we kick the shotgun out of our faces, or if we just let it hit us directly in the face. It's been generally, and there's like, as has been already highlighted, there's this already pre-prepared script of delegitimizing climate protesters. What happens is that like people are already excluded from power, who are doing what is entirely non-violent peaceful protest. They are already excluded from the halls of power, already called terrorists, already put in positions where they're designed to be discredited. Because fundamentally to people in power, there is no actual difference to someone who actually sets off a bomb on a pipeline and someone who peacefully chains themselves to Dáil Éireann's gates. This is why the fundamental issue is that we have to act radically. Because fundamentally to the people in power, it doesn't make a difference. Thank you, and I beg your pardon.